Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of PR Explored. This is the video podcast where we delve into trends and topics related to public relations. I'm your host, Michelle Garrett. I'm a public relations consultant and writer. And my guest today is Fred Cook.
Mhm.
Welcome, Fred.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks for being here. Fred is the director of the Annenberg Center for Public Relations at USC, and he is chair emeritus of Golin. And I'm so excited to have you here
Mhm.
today, Fred. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Do you want to tell us? I know I read a very brief introduction, but do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and what you're up to these days?
Well, I sure can. As you said, I've been at USC for the last 10 years. I teach in the Annenberg School, a leadership class based on a book that I wrote called Improvise. And I'm also the director of the Center for PR, and we probably do more research about the PR industry than anyone in the U.S. And before that, I worked at Golin for 35 plus years, and started in Los Angeles. And then when I became the CEO, I moved to Chicago for 20 years, and now I'm chairman emeritus. So I've had a lot of experience in the agency, worked with a lot of clients like Amazon and Starbucks and McDonald's and you name it. I've worked on it, and I'm really having a great time at USC. Great students, great school, great dean, and it's really fun.
I think it's incredible, and I always look forward to the research that you do there. I think it's really important, and I really am hoping to kind of shine a light on it a little bit because I think we need that, and there aren't a lot of great resources for it. So we
I
appreciate
appreciate
that,
that.
and I'm going to share today. We're talking about you do a survey every year,
Yes.
and I'm always excited to see the results and
Mhm.
hear the presentation when you present those results. This year, it was framed a little bit differently. So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about how it was set up this year.
Well, we worked with Zeno Group and IABC this year to create a survey which we call Mind the Gap. Here's a copy of it. And we stole that from the British railway system. But instead of the gap in the railway, it's a gap about generational gap. Because we
Mhm.
wanted to see, there's 4 generations working in PR right now, and we wanted to see if they viewed some of these serious issues that we're facing differently. And we also thought, we've done research about activism, about technology, about ethics, everything at the center for the last 10 years. But we wanted to look at, this is the most disruptive time we've ever experienced. And we wanted to look at 4 trends that we thought were really disrupting our business. One is AI. The
Mhm.
second is the hybrid workforce. The third is the changing media landscape. And the fourth is polarization. So we asked 4 different generations what they thought about the future of PR based on these 4 topics.
Yes, and the generational differences are very interesting. So, of course, as we would expect, there are some differences in the way that, depending on
Right.
what age you are, how you view the industry. So that we'll get into that a little bit too. Um, so what were the biggest takeaways that you saw? We're gonna look at some of them that I found interesting, but I want to know when you got the results and we're kind of looking at them, what were some of your biggest kind of aha moments?
Well, we anticipated there would be gaps. There definitely, we thought there would be between people who have been doing this for a long time and people just starting out. But the gaps aren't bad. That doesn't mean that's bad. They're just, anytime you have differences of opinion, that means that you're making progress. So we were pleased about that. I think the biggest surprise to me was the drop in, under the polarization banner, the drop in the number of PR people who believe that companies should be engaged with social issues. That
Mhm.
had plummeted from 89% 3 years ago. Last year was 85% and dropped 40% down into the 50s. So the idea of speaking out about a public issue has been has fallen off a cliff. And I was surprised it was that dramatic. But the interesting thing was that Gen Z still is very much believes that companies should have that responsibility. But the older generations of people in PR have become a little disillusioned about purpose-oriented communications. That was a big disappointment for me.
Yeah, I mean, why do you think that is? Because I have ideas, but why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's just we're so polarized now that companies are afraid to say anything because they think that it's going to alienate part of the population or the president himself and that kind of thing. And it's very politically driven. But we've studied polarization for years at our center, and it's almost to the point where it's carved in stone. It's not moving, and people don't even want to talk to one another about their political views anymore. And I think that's a little dangerous, in my own opinion. And companies have decided it's in their best interest just to be quiet and wait this out and hunker down and not talk about things that are going to be considered woke or be misinterpreted as something that will anger their employees or their customers or the government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it reflects necessarily their own personal views. No. It's more about the company they work for, the organization they work for.
And we'll see what happens. I don't know whether this 75% of the Gen Z that believes that we should be speaking out more often, whether they're going to change that dynamic or whether they're going to become over time disillusioned the same way the older generations have.
It is interesting to watch and see. I have two young adults and in the house, and so it's an interesting conversation always about this because I mean they do have very strongly held opinions, and it'll be interesting to see if they're able to take those into their professional life.
So. I hope so. I'm hoping so. I have a lot of confidence in Gen Z. I think that our surveys show that they're going to be the leaders of our industry in the future, and I think they have a pretty good grasp on where we're headed.
We'll talk about that a little bit. I mean, what makes you say that?
Well, when you look at AI and you look at the changing media landscape and you look at working hybrid work, their responses in our survey they over-indexed on all of those things. They're much more comfortable with the changing media landscape. They're already, as Wayne Gretzky said, they're already where the puck is. They're very comfortable with social media. They're not worried about the decline of traditional legacy media as older people are. They think that the changes taking place on that in media with influencers having more influence and social media being the dominant outlet for information is positive, very positive. And older people are a little less keen on that. I think also in the hybrid area, they're very flexible about their working environment. It's not that they don't want to go to the office. They're happy to go to the office, but they like a little flexibility in the way that they work. And in AI, they're all over AI. They love the idea that artificial intelligence will be part of our future. And they're learning about it at the same time older people are. And I think that's going to be a big part of their workplace experience is going to be based on using artificial intelligence.
Well, we've got a lot to dig into.
Yes.
But yeah, I just on the point that the younger communicators feel that it is important to address the social issues. I remember just a few years ago when there were big companies. I believe it was Coke. I believe it was one of the airlines, maybe Delta. That was they were really very active, politically and kind of speaking up. So it has changed quite a bit, but I don't know if it will stay the way that it is. So
that's what we're going to find out. I think that during Black Lives Matter, almost every company spoke out about their approach to the diversity and inclusion, and now that's a 4-letter word, and nobody's talking about it. So it's been a big shift, and we'll see whether the pendulum swings back or not.
Yeah. Yeah, we will see. Um, so let's see. You mentioned we were just talking about um, there was a finding about how a lot of the PR pros that took the survey would accept a pay cut to work remotely. And I
Yeah.
don't know if people understand the importance of this to workers and to attract, the best talent.
Yeah.
You kind of have to offer flexibility, don't you think?
Well, it's interesting. This all started with the pandemic, obviously,
Right.
um, and people started working from home. And at first, they didn't like it, and they got it. And over time, they got adjusted to it, and now they love it.
Hmm.
And there is in the PR industry, in particular, there's a lot of passion about this topic. And only we asked people whether they thought they'd be working in 5 years in a hybrid environment or not. 75% said they thought they would be working hybrid in the future. So it's no longer the exception to the rule. It's really an expectation on most people's part. But there are
Hmm.
CEOs that are that think that people should be back in the office, and they have good reasons for it, because I think culturally it's probably better for the company. But from a morale perspective, we have found that people are happier having this flexibility. And so when we asked people if they take a pay cut, in the PR industry, a lot of people said yes, they would, especially the younger people. The older people, baby boomers, were less enthusiastic about that. But I think that it doesn't mean that, like I said, they don't want to be in the office. They just like having that flexibility. So I think companies that offer flexibility are going to have an advantage in attracting the best talent in public relations, and agencies and corporate. And it was interesting, the corporate respondents to our survey were almost twice as willing to take a pay cut as agency people, because I think agency people have more flexibility than the corporate people. So it's
Hmm.
going to be something, we'll see how it plays out, but I think that people want it and expect to have some sort of flexibility in their schedule these days, and they're not going to give it up easily.
It's really interesting because, I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to work for myself was because I
Yeah,
didn't feel like I had to sit in a
right.
queue from, 8 to 6 every day to get my
Mhm.
so it never made sense to me, and yes, it took, the pandemic to really, bring it to the forefront, but it's just crazy to me that anybody ever, that this wasn't happening before. So, I mean, I don't see it going away, and, I feel like it seemed like a couple of years ago, the workers had more pull, and now I feel like the companies, of course, have more pull because we know a lot of people are having trouble, they're getting laid off, having trouble finding new jobs, and so,
Yes.
I don't know how much leverage people have as far as, making, not making demands, but, like, making requests like that.
They may not have as much leverage as they did before because of the job market, but I think the best people are always going to be attracted to by their companies are always going to be attracted to the best people, and if flexibility is something that they want, they'll move for that because it's important to them.
Right, and that's why I just think it's if you're a company, you're not considering, like, how much it widens your talent pool. I mean, if you're
Right.
only pulling from your little metro
Exactly.
area,
Yeah.
it's an interesting
That
idea.
was the beauty of the pandemic, is people hired employees from all over the country, and it made them they had access to talent no matter where it was. So you could get
Mhm,
really great people, just because they didn't work in your own city didn't matter.
right. Yeah, and I know some companies, for example, I know somebody who works for Apple who lives here in near me in Columbus,
Mm.
Ohio, but that's been going on for a long time. So some companies get it and have gotten it for a long time, other companies not.
And we also found that there's a misconception of people who work from home. People who work in the office have this idea that people work at home are doing the laundry and out gardening and going to the grocery. And it's just not true. The people that
Right.
work from home are often working longer hours than the people in the office. They're just not commuting back and forth. But I think that if companies, what we found in a different survey, we found that companies viewed working from home as a temporary thing during the pandemic, and they didn't really have the infrastructure in place to help support people working from home and to monitor their productivity or anything. They were just waiting for it to go away. And now that it's not going away, they have to figure out ways to manage this process so they know what's going on a little bit more effectively, and they can help the people understand what their expectations are.
Yeah, if you take away that commute, I would just think especially in,
Yeah,
bigger metropolitan areas, that would allow the people, the workers more time to spend doing their
definitely,
jobs. So,
definitely.
makes a lot of sense. Plus, you don't need the overhead, the building and the, equipment and the,
Yes,
all of that. So,
yeah.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense,
There are
but
a lot of benefits from it, for sure.
so let's see here. What else? All right, let's get into AI.
Hmm.
I'm reluctant, but I know we have to talk about one thing that I thought was interesting was that 40% of the PR pros surveyed predict that AI will lead to increased misinformation. And we already
Yeah,
see that happening, right? I
yeah.
mean, we're seeing that right now. So let's talk about that a little bit and just in general, what is the generational difference on AI in our profession?
Well, everybody puts misinformation at the top of their list of the things they're worried about. That's where it should be. What we found was that the older generations are more worried about it than the younger generations. And I think that the reason behind that is that the younger people have been living online for a long time. That's where they get their information. And I think they have a better sense of what is real and what is not real because of that experience. And older people are a little less discerning, they have a harder time discerning between fact and opinion than younger people. So I don't think it's a concern for the younger generations, Gen Z, but
Mhm,
it's not as much of a worry as it is for people who are less familiar with online. So I think over time, we're going to develop tools that will allow us to fact check more easily and determine whether information is coming from the right sources. But right now, I think that there's an instinctual difference between generations in terms of how they perceive the credibility of what's coming to them on their phones.
mhm. Yeah. Um, so, um, AI wise, and I didn't pull this out, but, like, what are people I mean, are most of the people surveyed did you ask about how many people are adopting AI-based tools to help them with their research and other aspects of their work?
We did, and the numbers are not enormous.
Okay.
We asked where they were using AI and different activities, and then the most common was social media, and using AI to work on social media to place content or to create content or to monitor it. And about half of the people we surveyed said yes to that. There's some areas like internal communications where it's much lower numbers, but I think this is happening very fast. We did a survey in January, and I think the numbers would be higher now. We were working some AI projects at USC, and I think that we're going to see a rapid adoption of all the different tools that can be used for creativity, for content creation, for synthetic audiences. All of these things are going to be really valuable for communicators in the future. It's just we are not we're not picking up on it probably as quickly as we should, but I think it's going to have to happen with everyone.
Yeah, I do think that there's a need to just be, careful about how you use it because I think people
Definitely.
maybe there are people that are using it that are telling the truth about using it in the surveys that I'm seeing, and I've seen that as a trend as well that people are
Yeah.
using it, but they're just not admitting that they're using it because they know the perception might not be great. So,
Well, even in the university setting, there is a question of whether we're part of a journalism school at USC, and there's a question, particularly on the journalist side, should AI be something that the students are using to create content? and they want to know whether an assignment was where they used AI to create it or they used AI to improve it, and how AI was involved. But I think that's a short-term situation. I think in a couple of years, AI is going to be like spell check in terms of content creation. And nobody asks you whether you looked up a word in the dictionary or you spell check. But and I think so. AI is going to become so ingrained in what we do that people won't even they won't be interested in knowing whether this was created by AI or if you used AI in this way or that way. It's just going to be part of everything that we do.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that.
But there are everything. Every new technology has its upsides and downsides. So there are definitely things with AI that we need to worry about. We need to worry about the accuracy. We need to worry about how it's being used to communicate false information. We need to worry about fake videos. But I think for the most part, people are going to figure that out, and they'll have technology that helps you figure that out. So I don't think we need to be overly concerned about AI. Our survey did show, though, that people think that it will reduce staffing, and I think a lot of people are sort of overlooking that at the moment. That they're saying that AI is not going to cause any layoffs or cause people jobs to be replaced. But I think that that may happen in a lot of different industries, and PR may be one of them.
Well, again, I think we know that AI can, share misinformation. It pulls from sources that may not be credible, and of course, it can just give you results that may not really be always accurate. So I think we just have to be really careful about it. I'm sure that there are ways, especially with agencies that are, trying to handle, a heavy client load, doing research and figuring out, the media databases are often outdated. So we need better ways to do that kind of research, I think. But I don't know. I don't know.
But I think people give AI a personality, and I think it's a thing that's going to act on its own. It's a tool. It's a tool just like anything else. And you use that tool. You can use it effectively or you can use it ineffectively, depending on your intent and your knowledge. So I don't think you need to think of it as some ominous thing that's going to take us over. It's something we use, and how we use it is really important. And we have to train people. And what we saw in our survey is that the training is the biggest opportunity. People don't expect young people to come into an agency or job knowing that much about AI, but they're not prepared to train them on AI. And the universities are USC's, we're working really hard to incorporate AI in our classes, but there's a lot to learn. And I think the biggest opportunity is, where is that training going to come from? A lot of people are just figuring this out on their own by experimenting with different tools and learning on their own time. But I think companies and agencies and schools have to begin training people how to use all these new tools. But it's happening so fast that it's hard to keep up with. It's a little overwhelming right now.
Yeah, I would say for colleges, it must be very difficult to figure out how to incorporate that, because I think for a while it was like, well, we don't want students using it, but now we have to teach them how to use it, and how do we do that? And so I'm sure that's
no, at USC we're embracing it. We're embracing AI because our students need to be as familiar with it as they can be. And next year we're setting up a course in the PR program that's an experimental lab that's just going to expose people to all the new products and have them work on them and get familiar with them, so that when they're out in the workplace, they know what's happening and they can keep up and use these tools as they come online and as they get better and better.
Well, there are a lot of options on the tool side, so
There
that's
sure are.
I don't think they're all gonna make it. So that's
Maybe not.
another area where you'd have to be ready to, figure out which ones to jump in on and which ones to kind of hold off. So,
but the interesting thing, we did another survey about AI separate from this one, and it said that the employees who are working with AI felt more excited and more valued in their work. So there is a benefit besides the efficiency And what AI does is it makes people feel like they're doing something valuable, and they feel more important. It's a
Mhm.
nice side benefit.
Well, but it's interesting then when we look at the flip side and how many people are not really embracing it. So I think, I think it's great that you're trying to get students on board with it because maybe that will help, the rest
Yeah,
of us who are maybe not, maybe more reluctant to get excited about it.
right. I think the people that's why I'm encouraged by the Gen Z, because they're not as worried about a lot of the things that people that have been in the business for a long time are worried about.
Mhm,
They're ready for the change, and they're part of the change. They're actually one of the reasons that things are changing.
mhm,
They're not as interested in pitching stories to legacy media as they are in creating content for new media, social media, because that's
mhm.
where they live. They're not
Yeah.
buying magazines. They're not watching television news. So they're causing the change as much as they are reacting to it.
Yeah, well, that's an issue that would be on my mind is just where, where is media headed as far as, I don't think it's all bad that we are, that clients may not be saying, well, I want to be in the Wall Street Journal. That's the cliche, right? That
Right?
every client wants
We
that.
asked what the ideal marketing campaign would include each generation, and the New York Times used to be like the holy grail of a PR campaign,
Mhm,
and it still is for the older crowd. But for
mhm.
Gen Z, getting an endorsement by Taylor Swift was much more desired than getting a story in the New York Times. So it just shows you what a shift has taken place in
Mhm.
terms of where people get their information and what's more powerful.
Yeah, and that's an interesting question as far as like how do you advise clients on which media to spend time reaching out to. I mean, it's always about where the audience is, so I think that's figuring that out and then going from there. But
Yeah.
I for one am not going to be sorry if if clients are not always asking about Wall Street Journal, New York Times,
Well,
for
those are
me to
still
see.
important, and they have a big ripple effect because those are played
Mhm,
out across social media. But a lot of them have paywalls and things like that, which
mhm,
restrict their people's ability to view them. And I
mhm,
understand why that exists, but I don't think long term that's going to be a viable strategy, because you've got few hundred thousand people reading the Wall Street Journal, and then on TikTok you have a billion people watching TikTok. So the numbers are astronomical in terms of social media reach, and it's going to be hard to compete with that.
Yeah, well, and again, with my B2B clients, it's trade media because they're
Yeah,
not behind a paywall. AI is ingesting the information, so it's very important for them to be showing up
yeah.
there because they're being pulled as sources to answer,
No,
questions in AI-based search,
yeah,
so
the traditional media is still very important to companies and to clients, and it will remain so for quite some time. But I was in a class where they were all the students, four groups were creating campaigns for a product, and it was an experiential class where there is a real product, real company, and I saw all the presentations that they gave, and not one of the four mentioned any traditional media in their campaign. It was remarkable. And they talked about social, they talked about experiential, they talked about different events that they would do, but nobody mentioned a magazine or a newspaper or a television program at all. It's quite
but you
surprising.
think that's a mistake, right?
Well, I think that they're overlooking it, but I'm just saying that in terms of where we're headed, I think
Mhm,
that's where we're headed, because if they're not even thinking about it, it's because they're not
consuming it.
they're not
Mhm,
consuming it.
mhm,
And that's an interesting, my favorite question in this survey that we did was, because everybody's getting their information from different sources, we thought, let's ask them, which generation do you think is the best informed about social, political, and issues? And every generation picked themselves as being the most informed. And that was really funny, because they all thought they were way more informed than the other generations based on the information that they're getting. And
Mhm.
that's kind of funny, but at the same time, it's problematic because um, older people, baby boomers, think that they know more than what's going on because they're reading the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times
Mhm.
than the Gen Z. So they think Gen
Mhm.
Z is not in tune with what's happening in the world because they're not um, consuming the same media. Gen
Mhm.
Z, on the other hand, feels like the older generations are uninformed because they're not on social and
Mhm.
to the greater to such a degree as they are. So
Mhm.
there's a misconception on both parts that that they don't know what's going on. That the older people think the younger people don't know what's going on, and vice versa. And I think
Mhm.
that's problematic when they should be working together to create solutions that
Right.
work for everybody. And they have to understand that there is uh, my son is 27, and he doesn't watch TV news. He doesn't read the newspapers. Doesn't read magazines, but he knows way more than I do about what's going on, just from social media and the different things that he has at his access at his fingertips. And it's a mistake to think that the younger people aren't aware of what's happening because they're not consuming the same media that we were accustomed to.
What I worry about though with that, with people getting their information from social, we know that YouTube is one of the hot, the
Right.
places where people go, TikTok. There's a lot of misinformation out there, so you
Well,
have to remember that the person consuming it also has to be discerning about like what sources they're, because I mean, those people are not trained journalists that are a lot of
no,
it.
they're not, but there's a lot of misinformation in the legacy media these days too, because it's because of polarization. There's a
Mhm.
lot of opinion out there that people are thinking is fact, and they're being fed that because it gets ratings, and people will be attracted to people to media outlets that are reflect their own views, and that causes a lot of misinformation as well. And you can see that on cable TV is so obvious. But
Mhm.
it's not just social media where misinformation is being promoted.
Mhm. No, that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a minute about, I know everybody's favorite topic, press releases.
Yes.
Those are still relevant, right? Isn't that what the survey showed?
Well, yeah, I think so. The number of press releases that are being distributed every year is enormous, and hundreds of thousands. And so I think that there's still a value for them, although it may not be the way to announce news
Mhm,
to the media. I think that has become a little tired. I think as a news distribution tool, social media is much faster and much easier, and has a broader reach. But the
mhm,
press release still is a way to get your information on the internet, to make sure that it's out there in an accurate form so people can find it if they need it. And I think
mhm,
that and also the press release is a great way to formulate your messaging and decide what it is you stand for and what your company is about. So
mhm,
I've talked to entrepreneurs who use press releases as a way to build their brand and a way to communicate what they're all about, even if they're not ending up in print. They're
mhm,
still important. Amazon uses what they call a PRFAQ for every new product that they release. Instead of doing a business plan, they write a press release and put Q&A together, because that's such a valuable tool in sort of figuring out what it is you want to say to the consumer and what it is the consumer is going to ask you about this new service or new product. So I think
mhm,
it's important, but it's press releases are important, but not for the same reason they used to be.
mhm. No, but I agree with you. I've always thought that they're a way to get everybody on the same page,
Yeah, exactly.
um, because you pull different people into the process of putting one together, and it kinda everybody's, singing from the same songbook
Right.
and all of that. So, I think in that way, they've always been important, and now I
Yeah,
feel like with all the misinformation, they might even be more important because 'cause they're the
exactly.
official word from the company,
Exactly.
so
Yeah, I
and
don't
also
think they're going away.
no, and also the, AI-based search, the search,
Yeah,
platforms pull from press releases, and I
yeah,
know people that
exactly.
will write, a press release just for AI-based search, which is certainly not the way that we used to write them. But again, that might be, something to consider. I don't
Yes.
know.
I think you're right. I think it's all different, but it's still important. And Gen Z recognizes it. They put more relevance value on a press release than anybody else.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I just know so many people who want them to go away, and I'm like, but why? Like, they're a tool. They're another tool that we can
They'll
use.
just be writing them with AI. That's the only difference.
I don't. Again, I'm not sure about that, but um, and you touched on this a little bit, I think, earlier about the outlook that people have in the industry about our profession.
Mm-hmm.
The finding was that 74% of PR professionals hold a positive outlook toward the future of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah. That was a very basic question we asked you at the beginning. With all these challenges, do you still feel positive about the future of PR? And 74% said strong, they very much so or somewhat positive. That's a good number. It's not an overwhelmingly exciting number, like 90% or 100% people feel good about it, but it's still a majority. And it was all generations felt pretty much the same. So everybody had about the same number. So I think if you at USC, that number would be like a B maybe, but nobody gets Bs at USC. But it would be a B or B minus. So it's not wonderful, but it's encouraging that we feel good about where we're headed. Other professions are challenged. Journalism is very challenged right now because of the changes in media. So that I think that PR is as a career is still an exciting opportunity for college students. Lots of people major in it, and at a lot of different colleges. So we're producing a lot of young, excited PR people, and I think they're going to have a good careers in our business. I think it's really I've loved every minute of it, and I think they're going to too.
I mean, this is graduation season, right? So
Yeah.
I've been talking a lot about to graduates and with graduates, and I mean, I think it is a really interesting time to be entering the profession, and I do think that PR is kind of more needed than it's ever been because we see kind of the communicators as going up the ladder because you need those skills to really lead and kind of keep yourself out of trouble and protect your reputation. So I feel like it's kind of having a little bit of a heyday, but I was surprised that it was this high of a number because I think a lot of people that are having trouble finding jobs might not be so positive about it.
Well, it's not easy getting a job. I teach. That's what I teach in my class when I teach. There's a lot about getting a job, and I help a lot of students get jobs. They're out there. There are jobs and definitely available. But you have to. Getting a job is a job in itself. You've got to almost work it like a real job to get one, and I help people figure that out. But I think this industry is. Jane Fonda spoke at our Annenberg graduation, and
Oh,
I know Jane Fonda is not everybody's cup of tea, but she said you're graduating in one of the most difficult times ever our country's ever experienced, and I think she's right that communicating in this environment is so tricky that you have to be very skilled at it. So I think the role of the public relations professional is more important than it's ever been, and it's going to continue to be. So I think it will, as an industry, we're going to continue to thrive, as even though we're not communicating as much as we probably used to be or should be.
yeah. No, I think that's a really positive note to wrap up on. Are there any other findings or things that you think are important for people to look at? I hope everyone looks at the survey. I'm going to put the link in there again.
Yeah, you can pick it up at the USC Center for PR website. I think the overall finding was, from my perspective, is that the future is in good hands, but we've got to engage with Gen Z more often. We've got to support their ideas with better And we've got to support them more with their ideas. And I think that the older generation sometimes needs to get out of the way. We've got to realize that they know what they're doing, even though they may not be consuming the same media we have or sharing the same ideas we have. They know where this business is headed, and they're already there waiting for it. So I think it's encouraging. We should be excited about the future, and we should be ready to turn over the reins to the younger people who I think will get us there. And so that's a good note. I think the people that are gonna lead this industry know where it's going.
That is that is a positive note, and we need those right now. So
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. I really appreciate you being here, Fred, and I appreciate the research you do and all the work you do at USC Annenberg. And I hope everybody checks out the results of the survey. And I thank you again for being here.
Thank you, and fight on.
Thanks, Fred. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.